Welcome to the deep dive. So today, we're going to take a look at all these sources you sent us
Oh, wow.
about education, and then there's economics and even a little bit of politics.
Yeah.
Got Elon Musk's pretty out there ideas about learning, and then we've got Grace Blakely.
It's a lot.
Yeah, she really kind of takes apart the whole idea of capitalism. And then we've got that curveball with Matt Gaetz leaving Congress.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're really trying to figure out the whole future here, you know, like work and learning and
The whole picture.
maybe even society itself.
Well, what's really interesting to me is that all these sources kind of wrestle with the same question, you know?
Oh, yeah?
That tension between individual freedom and then the need for structure.
Yeah.
You see that with Musk pushing for self-directed learning.
Okay.
You see Blakely really questioning the hidden controls that are in our supposedly free market.
Yeah.
And then even Gates trying to reshape the Department of Justice. So it really gets you thinking like how do you balance individual agency with the needs of the whole system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's just dive right in and start with Elon Musk's views on education.
Okay.
He actually went and started his own school, Ad Astra,
Yeah.
which is a pretty bold statement. What do you think sparked that?
Well, Musk really argues that traditional education, especially college,
Right.
is more about, busy work and socializing than actually really learning.
Like just going through the motions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He values real-world achievement
Okay.
over degrees.
Right.
And he always points to Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, all these college dropouts who became super successful. And his school Ad Astra really reflects this philosophy.
Yeah.
There are no grades.
Wow.
And the focus is on problem solving over memorization.
Okay.
He even wants to make learning feel more like a video game.
It's like he's saying the structure of traditional education is kind of getting in the way of real learning.
Yeah.
Do you think he has a point?
Well, I mean, Musk's approach raises some really interesting questions.
Right.
How do you actually assess, exceptional ability?
Right.
In a fair way?
Uh,
And can traditional institutions adapt to such a radical change?
mm-hmm.
And then what about the collaborative and social aspects of learning that happen in those traditional settings?
Yeah.
Those are kind of hard to replicate in a purely individualized model.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So now let's shift gears completely
Yeah.
and talk about Grace Blakely.
Okay.
She has a very different view on systems.
Yeah, she does.
She argues that our economic system actually already has too much planning.
Right.
It's just that it's hidden behind this curtain of free market rhetoric.
Yeah, and her argument is that we live in a planned economy, but it's disguised as a free market.
Okay.
And it's really corporations and financial institutions,
Ugh.
often with government support,
Oh, wow.
that are exerting significant control.
Okay.
And she uses the Boeing 737 MAX disaster
Right.
as a prime example.
Okay.
She believes that prioritizing shareholder value over engineering expertise
Okay.
led to those really tragic consequences.
So she's saying that this, intense focus on profits actually restricts our choices, even though it's presented as a system of freedom.
Exactly. That's what she's getting at. She argues that this concentrated corporate power
Okay.
that's driven by a constant need for profit,
Yeah.
it limits our freedom and our agency, despite the free market label.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's a pretty thought-provoking challenge to conventional economic thinking.
It's interesting how both Musk and Blakely are both kind of concerned about who holds the power to plan and make decisions,
Yeah.
even though they're coming at it from opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right.
Musk wants that power in the hands of individuals.
Yeah.
And then Blakely seems to be pushing for a more democratic distribution of control.
Yeah, that's right. That tension is really at the heart of so many of our societal debates. If we look at Blakely's ideas about collective action,
Okay.
she points to the Lucas Plan.
And what was that?
So this was a proposal that workers put forth to save their company by shifting from weapons manufacturing to making products that would actually benefit society.
Oh, wow.
And to Blakely, this really demonstrates the untapped potential for workers to make better decisions than profit-driven executives.
It's almost like she's arguing that the more voices you have in the planning process, the better the outcomes will be.
That's one way to interpret it, for sure. She also highlights successful community-led initiatives,
Okay.
like the one in the village of Blaenau Festiniog in Wales.
Wow, I'm never going to be able to say that.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
It was labeled as like left behind, but the residents turned things around
How do they do that?
by creating this whole network of community enterprises.
Wow.
So it's a real-world example of how people can come together and redefine what progress means for them.
These examples really make you wonder if our current systems are even designed to solve the problems that we face.
Right.
Or if they're more focused on just maintaining the status quo, even when it's not working.
Yeah, that's a crucial question. It's like she's challenging us to think about who actually gets to define progress.
Okay.
And if harnessing collective intelligence might be like a more effective way to tackle complex issues.
I see what you mean. So we've got these like big picture ideas about education and economics.
Right.
But then there's Matt Gaetz stepping down from Congress.
Yeah, totally different direction.
Yeah, it seems like his vision for the Department of Justice really shook things up.
Yeah, it did. Can you unpack what happened there?
Well, so Gaetz was a very strong advocate for reforming the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Okay.
Particularly regarding immigration and free speech.
Right.
He called for what he termed a self-deporting at the DOJ.
What does that mean?
So he was implying that those who opposed the reforms that he and Trump championed would leave.
Oh, wow.
His situation really highlights this constant struggle for control and influence within institutions.
Which kind of ties back to those power dynamics that we've been discussing.
Yeah, it seems like his vision for the DOJ was very focused on aligning the department with a particular set of political goals.
Yeah, that's right.
Which really makes you think about whose vision of justice should prevail.
Yeah.
And how those reforms might impact individual rights and freedoms.
It's a super complex situation.
Yeah.
With some potentially really far-reaching consequences.
I bet. So Gaetz's case is kind of like a microcosm of this larger battle over who gets to set the agenda and shape the future of powerful institutions.
Exactly. You're getting it.
It's like we're seeing these power struggles play out at every level,
Yeah.
from individual classrooms to entire economic systems to the halls of government.
And you're right. These sources really highlight the interconnected nature of these issues and how decisions that are made in one sphere can have ripple effects across society.
So we've got these like big systemic forces at play.
Yeah.
But then there's also the individual and their relationship with money.
Right.
You shared a thought-provoking quote from Francisco d'Anconia in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
Money is only a tool.
That speech offers a really compelling perspective on the moral dimensions of money. D'Anconia argues that money, when earned honestly, represents the value of individual effort and facilitates trade based on mutual benefit. It's a pretty powerful statement about the potential for money to be a force for good in society.
But he also warns that when money is acquired dishonestly, it loses its power and becomes a source of shame.
The speech is like a stark warning about the corrosive effects of corruption and force when those elements take over. Money loses its inherent value and becomes a symbol of societal decay. So it's a powerful reminder that economic systems are ultimately reflections of our values.
So where does someone like Robert Kiyosaki, with his rich dad, poor dad philosophy, fit into all of this? He seems to have a very different take on money and how to acquire it.
Kiyosaki definitely challenges conventional financial advice. He criticizes that whole idea of, get a job, save diligently, and invest in the stock market.
The traditional path.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, he advocates for entrepreneurship, real estate, and using debt and taxes strategically to build wealth. His approach really encourages risk-taking, learning from failure, and developing a mindset focused on creating assets rather than simply working for a paycheck.
He seems to be saying that financial literacy is crucial,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you agree with his specific strategies.
Right.
It's about understanding how the system works
Yeah.
and using that knowledge to your advantage.
That's right. Kiyosaki's perspective definitely challenges us, to rethink those traditional paths to financial success. And whether you agree with his methods or not. He highlights the importance of, understanding how money works and taking control of your financial future.
It's like he's saying that traditional education doesn't really equip us with the tools we need to actually navigate the complex world of finance.
That's a really valid point. And speaking of education, it's interesting to consider how these different approaches to learning and earning might actually play out as technology continues to reshape our world. I mean, we're already seeing automation and AI disrupting traditional industries, which is leading to like massive shifts in the job market.
And it's a bit unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah, it is.
How do we ensure that everyone benefits from these technological advancements?
Right.
It seems like some people are getting left behind.
That's a major concern. And it kind of brings us back to that question of who has the power to shape the future and how we can create systems that are more equitable and inclusive. Some experts believe that universal basic income, or UBI, could be a solution.
I've heard about UBI.
Okay.
But I'm not really clear on how it would work.
So essentially, UBI would provide everyone with a guaranteed minimum income, regardless of their employment status. And proponents argue that it would act as like a safety net for those who are displaced by automation and give individuals more freedom to pursue education, entrepreneurship, or other opportunities.
So it could be a way to adapt to a future where traditional jobs may become less available.
Exactly. That's the idea.
That sounds like a pretty radical idea.
It is.
Does it have any real-world support?
Well, it's definitely a significant policy shift.
Yeah.
There are pilots and experiments happening in various countries. But it's still a long way from being widely implemented. Critics worry about the potential costs of such a program. And whether it would discourage people from working.
It seems like we're facing a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, we are.
As we try to navigate this rapidly changing world. And on top of that, we're bombarded with information from all sides. Much of which seems deliberately designed to mislead or divide us. It's hard to know what to believe or who to trust.
You're right. The information landscape has become incredibly complex and challenging.
Yeah, it has.
We're seeing this rise in distrust of traditional sources of authority.
Like what?
Like the media? The government, even science.
And this erosion of trust has serious consequences for our ability to address collective problems and make informed decisions. So how do we sift through all the noise?
How do we do that?
And find our way back to a shared understanding of reality? It feels like we're becoming more and more divided.
That's like the million-dollar question.
It is.
Philosophers, educators, and technologists are all wrestling with this issue, and there are no easy solutions. Developing critical thinking skills. Cultivating media literacy and engaging in civil discourse are essential steps.
It's also important to be aware of our own biases and to actively seek out diverse perspectives.
For sure.
It sounds like it comes down to individual responsibility as well as collective effort. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix it.
You're absolutely right. The health of our democracy and the future of our society depend on our ability to navigate this information landscape effectively and find ways to bridge the divides that threaten to tear us apart.
So let's circle back to this idea of freedom, which seems to be at the heart of so much of what we've been talking about.
Freedom is a fundamental concept. But it takes on different meanings depending on who you ask.
How so?
You have someone like Ayn Rand, who championed individual freedom as the absence of external constraints, allowing individuals to pursue their self-interest without interference.
So like total freedom.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have someone like Grace Blakely, who argues that true freedom actually requires a degree of collective action and social responsibility, acknowledging that we're all interconnected and that our choices impact others.
Those seem like two very different ways of looking at freedom.
Yeah, they do.
How do we reconcile those seemingly opposing views?
Well, one way to think about it is through the lens of positive and negative freedom.
Positive and negative. What's the difference?
So negative freedom is about the absence of restrictions. The freedom from something.
I'm with you.
Positive freedom, on the other hand, emphasizes the ability to act and achieve one's goals. The freedom to do something.
I'm starting to see the distinction. Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you have the freedom to speak your mind without legal repercussions. That's negative freedom. You are free from censorship. However, if you lack access to education or economic opportunities, your ability to express yourself effectively or to use your voice to create change might be limited.
Okay.
And that's where positive freedom comes in.
Okay.
It suggests that true freedom requires not only the absence of constraints, but also the presence of certain conditions that enable individuals to thrive.
So it's not just about being free from something.
Yeah.
It's also about having the resources and opportunities to actually exercise that freedom in a meaningful way.
Precisely. It's a nuanced but crucial distinction that touches on issues of social justice, economic equality, and access to opportunity.
Wow.
And it's a debate that's likely to become even more critical as we grapple with the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century.
Speaking of grappling with challenges, we haven't talked much about Donald Trump's perspective on these issues.
Oh, right.
He seems to have some strong opinions.
Yeah, he does.
Especially when it comes to education.
Well, Trump's vision for education really aligns with a more traditional approach, emphasizing what he calls patriotic values. He's been critical of what he sees as like a Marxist influence in schools, advocating for a return to more conservative principles. He's even called for abolishing the Department of Education.
Wow.
Claiming it's pushing a radical agenda that undermines parental rights and traditional values.
That seems like a pretty extreme position.
It is.
What are the implications of getting rid of the Department of Education?
It's a really complex issue.
Yeah.
With far-reaching consequences.
I can imagine.
Abolishing the Department of Education would likely lead to significant changes in how education is funded, regulated, and administered across the country.
Wow.
Supporters argue that it would give more control to states and local communities, allowing them to tailor education to their specific needs and values.
Right.
Opponents, on the other hand, worry that it could exacerbate inequalities and create a patchwork system where students in wealthier districts have better resources and opportunities.
It sounds like a move that would have a profound impact.
For sure.
On the future of education in this country.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
It's a debate that's likely to intensify as Trump continues to campaign and push his education agenda.
And this goes back to that idea of power and control. That we've been talking about. Who gets to decide what our children learn and what values are emphasized in the classroom?
That is a fundamental question. And Trump's stance really reflects a deep-seated distrust of centralized control in education. He believes that power should be returned to states and local communities. But critics worry that this could lead to a more fragmented and potentially unequal system.
His focus on what he calls inappropriate materials and the teaching of critical race theory has also been quite controversial.
These are certainly hot-button issues that raise important questions about the role of ideology in education.
Like what?
Like, whose values should be reflected in the curriculum? How do we balance parental rights with the need for a well-rounded education that prepares students for a diverse and complex world?
Feels like we're facing a real battle over the hearts and minds of future generations.
You're right. And the stakes are incredibly high.
They are.
The choices we make today about education economics and the very nature of freedom will shape the world our children inherit.
So as we enter the final part of our deep dive, what are the most pressing questions we should be asking ourselves?
It feels like we've kind of been circling this idea of power throughout our whole deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
Whether it's about, who controls the future of learning, or how economic systems shape our choices, or who actually gets to define justice. The question of power just keeps coming up.
Yeah, it does. It's a thread that connects all these seemingly totally different sources.
It is. And I think throughout history, societies have always kind of grappled with balancing individual autonomy with the need for collective structures. And those tensions are especially pronounced in times of rapid change and uncertainty.
Yeah, like right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like what we're experiencing now.
It can feel overwhelming, honestly. We're facing climate change, technological disruption, political polarization.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel kind of powerless in the face of these massive challenges.
I totally understand that sentiment. But I think these challenges also present opportunities.
For what?
For innovation, collaboration, and progress. So instead of feeling overwhelmed, we can actually choose to engage, to become informed, and to participate and shape in the future we want to see.
So what does that look like in practice?
Right. That's the question. Where do we even begin?
Yeah.
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that each of us has a role to play, however small it may seem.
Okay.
We can engage in, local politics. We can support community initiatives.
Got it.
Or we can even just have conversations with friends and family about these issues.
Okay.
It's about reclaiming our agency.
Yeah.
And understanding that we're not just passive bystanders, but active participants in shaping the world around us.
You mentioned the importance of being informed.
Right.
But with so much information out there.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
And so much of it unreliable or biased.
Right.
How do we even know what's true? Like, how do we discern that?
That's where critical thinking comes in.
Okay.
We need to develop those skills to evaluate information, to question assumptions, and to consider multiple perspectives. It's also crucial to cultivate media literacy and to be aware of the ways in which information can be manipulated or distorted to serve specific agendas.
So it's not just about consuming information. It's about actively engaging with it, questioning it. And thinking for ourselves.
Exactly. It's about becoming discerning consumers of information and recognizing that not everything we encounter is created equal.
It's also about having those difficult conversations, right?
It is.
Even when they're uncomfortable or challenging.
Absolutely. We need to move beyond those echo chambers and engage in civil discourse with those who hold different views. It's through dialogue, through the respectful exchange of ideas that we can begin to bridge divides and find common ground.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important message is this. Don't be afraid to question, to challenge, and to engage. The future is not predetermined. It's being shaped by our choices, our actions, and our collective will. And the more informed and engaged we are, the better equipped we'll be to create a future that works for everyone.
That's a powerful reminder.
Yeah.
So to our listener, we leave you with this final thought.
Okay, hit him with it.
What does freedom mean to you?
Right.
And what are you willing to do to protect and expand it for yourself and for future generations?
Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better world.
Yeah.
That's the essence of a true deep dive.
That's it for this week's Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.